Okay. I am going to film a in-depth, quite lengthy breakdown of my system and a few examples of a sort of microstructure utilization of it, as well as a macro, in terms of where we are in a said range. So to sort of introduce this system, I would say it is simply intra-range, so in between, so shorting, longing within a range of support and resistance. Others call it supply and demand, etc. So intra-range scalps with refined entries after a sequential mechanical criteria is met, and refined take profits also. Simply that, it's the confluences, support and resistance, trend, just sort of price, market structure. Just occasionally I switch over to a line chart. I think it can make it just easier to visualize what I might be on about when talking about just the structure of price, what we're doing in certain legs of price. I combine that with certain key levels, which I have refined massively, then followed with scaling down timeframes for executions, and then scaling back up for management. So that is just an introduction of the confluences. I'd say the most crucial one is structure and what price looks like, and then what we can foresee it doing in the future. So intra-range, clearly just playing in between the bands of supply and demand, or support and resistance. An added confluence, I would say, is call it a sort of a weak low above a area of interest, or inducement levels lying above a key level, or sort of lows or highs that you could see being taken out as a form of a sweep of liquidity, if you want to call it, prior to your entry. If I see a nice key level of inducement being met and swept, and then my level below being reacted out of, that's a added bonus, added piece of confidence within the setup. So I start on the 15-minute time frame, and I'm going to zoom quite far out. You can barely even see the candles, but I'm going to look at just simply this whole range here. More specifically, this range here. And I'll explain why. So, this is my current range of interest, spanning quite a few days. We've got a clear peak and a trough, a high and a low. I'll talk about the placements of my key levels shortly. Within this, I want to see either extremities met and a reaction clearly shown out of either band, followed by then my lower time frame execution. However, you can see that this extremity, right, this is where I may confuse myself. I don't want to overword it, so all right, I'm going to come back to this range and then what happened next. But firstly, I'm going to talk about what my system tends to look like, bearing in mind market structure, and the confluences that I previously mentioned. So if we now just fixate on this sort of this range here, you can see this is one bearish leg here, followed by a bullish, creeping down, but then generally trending down, yeah? So, all these lower lows being made and eventual lower lows, and this is clearly a downtrend, right? Simply put. And how I actually identify a downtrend before it has completely played out is actually quite a nice example. So we are approaching a key level, the extremity of the range, previous range that I was talking about. We didn't meet it. However, we then put in greater bearish structure, breaking below some weak lows, was taking them out first, pulling back up, failing to break out of this region to then tap the main area of interest. It couldn't even reach this level, continued to then melt down. So seeing that, the failures to break higher and the successes in breaking lower, indication of a downtrend easily. Another confluence I use are imbalances. Some call them fair value gaps. Imbalances, just gaps, a pattern within a 3-candle formation where the middle one leaves a gap between the outer two top and bottom wick and the reverse for a bearish imbalance here, here, bullish there, okay, etc. I'm sure people know what an imbalance is. So I look for violations or closures through imbalances to confirm a direction of trend. You can see we broke through both of these in the aggressive leg, leading up nearly to the key level before reacting down, breaking below lows, violating this minor irrelevant support, however, still on price. Right. Breaking below these, again, more here. This leg, all imbalances, but essentially in this range, all bullish imbalances were essentially, and eventually, not essentially, they were certainly, most definitely, eventually violated. This leg violated, potentially, tiny one there violated, and on this leg violated. So we can see that we are sort of in a micro range bearish trend within an area of shorting macro from this, so a greater level of interest. However, we'll see what happens. But okay, so reminder, I start by looking at just simple 15-minute structure of a range, identifying what trend we're in by breaking and closing below previous lows or highs, or violating, closing through, and price body closing completely through an imbalance or a gap, confirming the direction of the trend, which I will then position myself in the same direction if the rest of my levels are met, respected, and execution is given. So now that we know we are in a bearish trend, I then start my scaling down onto the 3-minute, which is where I identify my key level. So this was, if we can imagine what we just saw on the 15-minute, this was that what I called aggressive leg up to near my main area of interest before breaking lower and eventually putting in that eventual bearish range. And to identify the level of interest for this bearish example, since we want to be looking for shorts given the directional confirmation from breaking below weak lows or just lows, low resistance lows, as well as violating and completely closing through imbalances. So I now look at, so this is for a bearish example, as just said, the highest body closing candle in the leg. So so this is the entire range that we are currently looking at that gave us the confirmation of the direction that we could be looking for shorts. I then want to find the level of resistance or supply, which will be at the absolute peak, the extremity of that range. If I go back onto the 15-minute and just visualize, it is just a top sort of band of that range. It's the extremity of it, right? But specifically, I choose the highest body closing, meaning... Oh, that's a crap example because that one's very obviously that one. But okay, no, I won't get too confused. Okay, so, well, the highest body closing candle in the direction before the trend was then reversed, right? So we were trending bullish before the reversal. So I want to look at the 3-minute highest body closing. So the candle with the highest closing body. Just reworded what I said. And I choose for the bearish scenario the bottom wick. If we look at, I'll just go to a very bottom here. This would be for a bearish example. So say there was a shift in direction on this leg. I then look at the lowest closing body candle in that then downtrend before the reversal, confirming a new direction. Right, this is just hypothetical and an example. But again, still just 3-minute. It would then be this candle here, because this is the lowest body closing candle, bearish body closing candle, but because that is the range before the reversal. That is the direction before the reversal. So, and for the bearish, I would choose the top wick, but in this case, there is no top wick. Well, there may be minuscule, but just in some cases, it may just be the top of the body. But yeah, for in a bullish scenario, if you want to look for support, it would be the lowest closing bearish candle, the lowest body closing bearish candle in the direction before that direction is reversed. And for a bearish example, the highest bullish body closing candle in the direction before that direction is reversed on. And bottom wick for the resistance, top wick or top of the body for the support, same, can go for this one, could be the bottom of the body. Right, that is the level identified, and then I simply wait for that level to then get met. And previously I mentioned about areas of inducement or liquidity potentially being taken out before your key level being met. We can see that there is this resting high just previous to the level being met, which did get taken out. That's not a must for my system, however it's nice seeing. So we then, once the level has then been returned to, once the level has been met, I then wait for reactions out of it. So similar to, so this was the area of liquidity or inducement that got swept out prior to entry. So very similar to how I judge direction on the 15-minute time frame, by breakages of lows or closures of imbalances, right? We can see both here, some internal lows being broken through and closed past on this heavy bearish leg here, but I was actually in this position previous due to this imbalance getting instantly violated upon the first tap of the zone. I thought that was a very, very strong indication. One tap, straight reaction. Violating this imbalance here, we then... Okay, and then this is my entry criteria. So, well, that was my entry criteria. I wait for my key level to be met, my 3-minute support or resistance band. Then scaling further down to now the 1 minute, waiting for reversals out of that zone. If the zone is held, it tends to just tap it and reverse. But if, well, I'll talk about that in a moment. Reversals through imbalance closures or breakages of internal lows or highs for the opposite bias. We can see that this imbalance closure occurred first, and then similar to how I identify the support resistance band, I then enter off that same sort of candle identification, but now it's on the 1 minute. So we can remember that on the 3-minute I chose my band by the highest body closing candle in the range before the reversal, giving the directional confirmation. Here we can see we tap my zone, react immediately out of it, confirming a reversal by imbalance closure and then eventual breakages of all these lows here. However, I was in before that because of this, and this is the candle that I entered off. It is the highest body closing candle in that direction before tapping the level, then giving the reversal. So very similar wording to what I was talking about on the 15-minute with identifying structure. It's very similar. And then also, well, no, more so the 3-minute with identifying the band. So it is the highest body closing candle in the direction. And in this case, it's a bullish direction before the reversal. So bullish direction into the zone before reversing out of. So I'm looking at the highest body closing bullish candle. Not this. That is a bearish candle, right? Oh, obviously. So execution, slight drawdown. And we can actually see... Well, no, that did... Okay, ignore that. Entry and my stops are always at that high of the stab in into the 3-minute band level area of interest. However, I do give it a slight bit of breathing room just for spreads and comfortability of... I honestly, psychologically, harder for me to look at something like that than for me to look at something like that when I'm in an active trade. I know it's minimal, but it does it offers me a slight buffer and more comfortability and psychological ease when in and managing the trade. So that is my entry, and then I just simply let it run. And we can then see how this leads on to another. I'm going to talk about take profits with this next example because it's easier for me to explain with this one. And this was a greater confidence short because, so bearing in mind that I use all of the confluences that I've previously mentioned, there's an idea of an extreme level of resistance. We failed to meet it. We then broke lower, sweeping and breaking lower, creating lower lows, failing to break higher, and reacting out of this then internal resistance, giving that lovely reaction and a successful trade. And in doing so, presenting another imbalance closure on the 15-minute time frame, indicating a potential trend reversal once more, reversing this leg of price. Well, not this entire leg of price, but this leg of price indicated with the closure of this imbalance, right? So again, it's rinse and repeat. Drop down onto the 3-minute. I then look for the highest body closing bullish candle in this range of the leg, because this was the 15-minute leg that violated and closed and ran through completely this 15-minute imbalance. So I want to then find the highest body closing bullish candle before the trend reversal, which we can identify as this one, choosing the bottom wick as it is resistance. If it were bullish, would be the top wick, right? So I then, again, very patiently and simply wait for a return to that zone. No areas of inducement prior to the level here for us to sweep out. Again, that's what I said. It's just a added level of confidence to see that being shown. And this is another example of why I give my trades a bit of breathing room. Even with this bit of breathing room, on many forex brokers, due to spreads, very likely that this would have been a stop loss. However, well, I trade futures, but yeah. So 1 minute now. This is that 3-minute resistance band, the highest body closing bullish candle on the 3-minute in that range before the reversal that was made clear via that 15-minute imbalance closure. Now on the 1 minute, waiting for very similar again to the 15 minute, waiting for reversals out of that level, given through breakages of internal lows or highs, or violations and closures through imbalances, which we can see happens here. Now this one is harder to spot, right? Because initially, I'll just mark the bottom of them. We have this large imbalance here that probably is what your eye went to immediately. And you can also see... So, well, okay, no, I'll talk about this one first, right? So this one was not closed through. So I would not have been wanting to look for shorts off of the highest body closing bullish candle before the potential. So at this point in the leg, there is no potential for me to short off of this candle, right? Because we have not had any imbalance closure. However, when I saw that we pulled back, tapped into this area of imbalance here, creating an internal high area of inducement to act as a sweep prior to tapping my level that I wanted, followed by no top wick, volume imbalance, complete volume imbalance. This was a strong reaction of, all right, price, we were picking up some volatility out of this zone and showing some signs of a reversal, right? Again, so then this is what gave me my confirmation to then enter off of this candle, which I did, and then we could have had greater confidence with then this imbalance eventually being closed through. However, this large bullish imbalance did obviously offer a bit of chop, but we eventually got through because the greater, my top-down analysis with precision of levels is stronger than just a clump of a few candles on the 1 minute time frame, right? So trust your plan. It will fail occasionally. Statistically, obviously, don't be a retard. It is needed. Losses are needed for a successful system to be successful. That's what a fucking win rate is. So you will occasionally get stopped out in positions like this, but this was this offers a slightly different angle of my system where we can then see a bit of confusion pre-entry and then again an area of inducement prior to entry, whereas the previous one was from a 3 or 15 minute sweep of that inducement before tapping a level. And I said I would also talk about the placement of take profit levels. So for this instance, as we were more convicted in shorts given this imbalance closure, so this is then the leg that I'm interested in, right? To pick my take profits, my focus instantly goes to the leg of price, which was the leg that confirmed that I wanted to get into the shorts or long that I've got into. In this case, shorts, right? So I want to look at the leg that closed through that imbalance to give me the confirmation for shorts. That's all I do on the 15 minute. Just visually see, right, okay, so it's around here, and it will always be towards the bottom. Because, okay, I'll now explain. So after then visualizing and identifying the leg of price that confirmed your directional bias, I then go back down again to the 3 minute. So that is this leg here, yeah? And I look at, firstly, the very, very bottom of this leg. And similar as if I were choosing the, in this case, support band, I look for the lowest body closing candle in this range before then the reversal up to giving the reaction out of the zone and then entry, okay? That is my first area where I'm thinking, okay, this could be a take profit. However, I then make these, I refine my take profit levels to make the strike rate of them getting hit better, so I have essentially more frequent complete full TPs rather than partials to getting trailed out, okay? And I do that by then identifying, so you'll see in this video how my system is massively stringed together, and that I essentially do the same shit on my 3 time frames over and over in slightly different context. Okay, so I've identified the lowest body closing candle in the trend of that leg of price which gave the directional confirmation. So we had the 15-minute gap that got ran through, confirming I wanted to get into shorts. We are now at this point talking about the targets that I've chosen for these shorts. And so I then, from the 15-minute, know what leg of price gave us that directional shift. Scaling then down onto the 3-minute once more. Firstly, like identifying the lowest closing body candle in this scenario, the support. And then I further refine these by looking at imbalances left within that leg that created that bottom of that trend reversal, right? So, and I only focus on that first leg, a micro leg, if you will. And I look at imbalances, so we can see imbalance there, imbalance as a complete volume imbalance, complete gap here. I would just say this whole, that's an entire gap there, right? But I pick the first imbalance that then would have got ran through, obviously, on the return up to the level to give entry. I pick, so in this scenario, since we are looking for shorts and that this was a bearish leg of price, I'm looking at the very bottom, a very small micro leg on the 3-minute. So I wouldn't look at this entire leg. I would look at just the only clump of candles which created the bottom, right? Imagine if I'll try and stop leading astray. Right, I just pick the first imbalance that got closed through, and I pick the top of it. If I was in longs looking for ideas for take profits, and I'll just find say we were in longs up here, this was the peak of the range that gave us that directional shift for me to get into longs. I would look at this leg and I would look at the bottom of it in the bullish scenario, and I would find that first, and then this would be my take profit. But anyway, we then, so that is my take profit placement. The highest imbalance that got closed through on the micro leg that created the bottom of that 15-minute leg, which gave us the directional shift and confirmation of directional bias for us to position ourselves in shorts or longs. And that is essentially my system. So then now moving on to this Asia trade, and how this then range that I previously mentioned at the very beginning was, okay, that's how I'll segue into this, right? So this range that I wanted to play in between, this support was eventually, this resistance rather, was eventually met. However, we completely shat through it, broke through it, no reaction given out of it. We closed completely above, look, on the 3-minute, okay, indicating, right, we are now macro bullish, right, because the support has been broken. However, this is the only sort of time I will use much higher time frames, other than just looking at where we are, say, on like the months. For instance, this month on Aussie, we don't have a bottom wick. Just things like that I'll pay attention to. But we can see that on different time frames, this candle, which was the 3-minute break of that resistance, actually acted as just a great sweep of quite a few very strong, just highs of that range, right? 4 hour, hourly, etc. You can see massively, right? Just swept, reaction straight down. So, given that context, I was like, okay, I will then see how the then support holds, because even though we did break it on the 3, but it acted as a massive sweep on higher time frames, we could now see this support fail. And this was an area of inducement just resting above my key level of support within this entire range. And you can then see that we tapped it, did react out of it, and then later on came to, and I positioned off longs here, but was trailed out. You can then see that this is the level of support. This is the level that I did not want to get broken. And if it was broken, that will indicate that support has been broken. And so I can, with confidence, look for shorts again from the peak of this newly made range. So we can now forget about that support because it has been broken. Along with that inducement being swept out, this giving a valid reaction off the first tap, but then later on coming and breaking completely past on the 3 minute, breaking the low of that support, right? So I was then like, okay, I now need to sit on my hands for quite a while waiting for this peak to be met. With, again, you can see a high here, area of inducement, right beneath my placement of my resistance, which again is the highest body closing candle in that trending range, in that trending direction before the reversal, which was given clear to us on a plate from very, very large imbalance, nearly failing to get broken. Bearish imbalance here, holding, given a then greater bullish leg and displacement out of this then sort of just clump of price, then eventually breaking beneath this imbalance, again then breaking below these lows, and then, as just mentioned, breaking the core support of the range that I was interested in. Okay, so we've got the placement and we've got the area of inducement pointed out, right? So we've got the levels in mind, and it's quite a lovely bit of structure, this. And whilst I'm here, I'll talk about the targets I chose for this trade. So we are here. We are looking for shorts as the support mainly. So this is the example of how my system can be applied when you tie in more macro confluences. We had a higher time frame sweep of two great highs. We had core range support being broken, that was previously held, and this range was traded in for quite a while. That was broken alongside a sweep and aggressive closures on higher time frames. Lovely area of inducement on top of that. So it was a combination of all my confluences, but just sprinkled with a higher time frame sweep and my key support being broken. Because I can just be playing ping pong within ranges, but then when support's broken and key extremity support or resistance, it then offers potential for moves with great volatility, as then essentially a new range is wanting to be put in place, right? So you can easily have then anticipated, right? But that, okay, I'm not trying to sound then greedy. You can easily anticipate a lower low, but my system, extremely refined over hundreds of trades, I stick with the most refined take profit. So 15 minute bearish leg, confirming the direction which we wanted to get into, right? Many imbalance closures all the way down, breaking all lows, breaking support. This is the clump. Scaling then down onto the 3 minute, because I'm now just showing the targets that I chose. You then find the very bottom of that trend that gave us that directional shift. You look at first the very lowest body closing, in this case bearish candle, and you choose the top, and that is the first idea for targets. But then you further make these conservative, right? And this is a different example, as the previous example, it only had a few candles in that leg that created the bottom, but you can see that this is a much larger leg, yeah, but still it's the exact same. I pick the first volume imbalance that was violated, closed through on that leg down, right? And that's always my take profit, but with great conviction of these positions with higher time frame analysis tied into it. you can hold runners, which is what I did on my second account, for the potential of these getting hit. Get with a very tight trail, because usually if you are correct, you can see that the volume and volatility to these, the manipulation to the levels are great, because you're just positioning yourself at extremities of ranges, and ranges, people trade intra-range or breakout and retest. Everything is really repackaged and spoken about differently. You have a range, you can either trade within it or trade the breakout of it. And so trading when there's only extremely lovely and harsh reactions out of the extremities of the range, of course, just sort of logically can give some good trades, especially when you are only positioning yourself at the extremes. However, then occasionally I will get positions and then it will just shoot instantly to stop loss, which is also a nice thing when your average trade duration for losses are only a few minutes. Take a loss, you're done for the day within 5 minutes. Take a win, you can be in it for a few hours, but I mean, the risk to reward, it's plentiful. So that was the target, and then you can see this, another added layer of conviction for this trade. This was the tap. So sweeping area of inducement, weak high, just beneath my key level, 3-minute support. We tap it, a few candles, bang, instantly reversing, imbalance closure, violating the whole leg, large imbalance closure, also violating, right? Clear downtrend, clear reversal out of this level with minimal drawdown to the tap of that level. 1 point, like minimal. However, not an entry for quite a while. But you can see, so I'll now just pop straight back to the 3-minute. We've got a nice area, well, region of inducement or liquidity to sweep out prior to tapping the then 1 minute. The 1 minute highest body closing candle that was created into the leg up to my 3-minute resistance before the reversal. This reversal confirms, okay, I'm now waiting for entry. However, we didn't get it for quite a while. And all whilst doing so, we were building up all of these lows. Just, it's the most obvious fucking shit in the world. Like, with my conviction of high time frame sweep, complete violation of core extreme support, lovely move, manipulative move, directly straight back to the zone, back to the level of resistance, immediate reaction given out of, all whilst then slowly chopping back to my entry region, and entry level, whilst accumulating and just creating all of these, people call them, just fuckloads of lows, low resistance lows, just just draw a trend line, mate. Just, it's all of these lows when directionally I'm so convicted on shorts. You just need to listen to your system and pick up these things on price. And also I've been trading Aussie dollar and primarily only Aussie, occasionally euro, but when you really get to know your pair, you pick up on these patterns. I mean, it's just pattern recognition, isn't it? So all these weak lows just building up, accumulating, just it was gorgeous to see. And then once I knew, once we broke that, just literally just draw a trend line. Once you then broke that, you could see a great plummet to our levels. I honestly didn't expect it to be this quick. Shit with fundamental, but we eventually came and gave entry. I 0 drawdown entry on the first tap. However, we then did experience a bit of draw, because I mean, look at the time of this entry, it was ridiculous. 38 minutes until market close. It was because my system is completely mechanical in its criteria, yet discretionary or discretional in the way that in the context that I apply it to, which is just the view and analysis I have of the initial structure. Yeah. But I still just listen to it when it when it shows, no matter the time. And a lot of the time it does actually happen at really peculiar times, usually bang on a market open or at the start of a at the start of a market session. A lot of the time Asia, my system, I'm going to stop waffling about it. This was just a video on 2 examples of just trading the current sort of live presented structure with those 2 previous trades. And then how you can also tie it in and use the exact same confluences and apply it to just a broader macro, the exact same time frames, but just tied it in with higher time frame analysis and conviction, giving potential trades like this. So then for the foreseeable, we can see that still, after this key level of support was broken, we then came up, held this resistance, shooting down, and remember just my system, 15-minute imbalance closures or breakages of lows. We get this entire bullish leg up to that zone, all imbalances close through, obviously, as well as this then support, which was my final take profit for extensions, being met, but then that support being broken through, violated, new lows being put in place in the eyes of the whole range in quite a just like odd area. You could see it come lower before a valid break higher, but I think given that sweep and that aggressive push down and where we are in this entire range, we could then see a return to this, just sort of that region here, given to us. So this is again a potential for another move like this, tying in just my system but with ideas of what we are in the month, in the range. Again, I said no monthly bottom wick whatsoever. We have reacted and swept out of some lovely highs, reacted harshly, coming into some minor support, but not meeting the very extreme bottom at well. Failing to tap either potential regions of that extreme macro support. And also, no, I'm not going to talk about that. But heavy bearish leg put in place here. We can then see a potential pullback again to this extreme, which the then resistance in this newly made region after that entire leg being violated, the highest bullish body closing candle identified. We could see an eventual return all the way up here. However, we have come into this fucking dicking of a candle down, and then started to reverse once more. However, breaking above these highs here, closing through this bearish imbalance, closing through these bearish imbalances, putting in a higher high. So we could see, if this support down here holds, we could see then a return higher, at least to this region. Or, given the... given the newly made 15-minute imbalance closures here and here, with this leg, we can also see price. So this is what I just have my levels and I patiently wait. So I've just shown 3 hindsight trades that I've took, and now this is a sort of forward bit of analysis, right? So where we are in the range, we have just broken many levels of key support with a lovely return to then resistance, with then an immense reaction back down, again breaking newly made support, right? So the bias is far greater on on a bearish structure on shorts than longs for me currently. We can have more conviction in this when we see what price will do next week, because I'm filming this on the weekend. But we can see, given that break here, an eventual return up to that new resistance, reaction out of, to then come back down, right? Or now that we have seen these highs being broken above, a few minor bearish imbalances being closed through, and support being left behind, we could see price return lower first to then come up to our refined TP region, which would probably be somewhere around here, or seeing as or come up to this, and if this resistance is held, then down to here, potentially then up to there, then potentially lower, right? Or a lot of ors, and that's what this is. It's all just reactions to what price shows you. We have then bearish imbalances left behind on this entire leg, and if we see price next week open closing through these, we could then see a return to a level of support within this clump, to then reach here, to then go lower, to then potentially, right, it could be, we could see any reaction out of either ranges, either band, and we just position ourselves precisely neutrally off of each band. But this is what I would mean when it's sort of intra structure, because you can see the system is still showing, as we have had 15-minute imbalance closures on this leg, but in the whole structure of this trend, this is the main area of interest. You can see all three levels of resistance just sort of match up with minimal difference in, a very small area of resistance, that with supports being broken, lower lows being made. This is the more convicting area to short from on the whole macro structure, which gives trades with greater volume out of usually, or again then, which were the previous two examples, A and B, where you can trade intra the range, which we could see were all of the potential examples I've just mentioned. We can, it could sweep straight past this support, this resistance, that just looks shit. But there's a lot of waiting, because obviously when you're just trading around the extremes of a range, you must wait extremely patiently for these extremes to be met. And then occasionally a zone is violated, and that I do have criteria for that, which I'll talk about in another video on the management and criteria of invalidations of entry, and then the active management of break-evens, partials, etc. But yeah, that was a run through of just a few examples of my system, with a bit of potential ideas for what Aussie could do next week. Generally heavily bearish, given just the structure. It's honestly, is again, like I said at the start, swap to a line chart, it's not hard to see just that's going down, right? So hopefully this video was clear and useful, and offers you the opportunity just to get a good valid insight into my system, how it can be applied, how you can use it on an intra-range, a sort of substructural level, and then a sort of a macro range structural level, and how it applies to both. This system, I have statistical proof of 300 plus live journaled trades, all probabilities journaled. I maintain where it fluctuates between the low 60s and the 66% for win rate. However, my average risk to reward has maintained at slightly just above 1 to 3. So with that win rate and that average risk to reward, this system is highly profitable, highly beneficial, and really quite easy. Very minimal confluences, but just stringed together in a series of sequential analysis on the 15, the 3, the 1, with higher time frame and structural context in mind. That's the only discretional part about my system, which I believe is every trader's true edge, which only comes from the time exposure you have in the markets. Again, what I was talking about earlier, just simple pattern recognition. When people say, "Oh, I've got a feeling this looks like this will do this," it's not a feeling. It's just something you can't remember, but that your brain has seen before, and it's telling you, but you can't directly put those pathways together, right? But that's what intuition is. Intuition isn't like fucking magic. It's you seeing shit before, but your current self not really being able to directly pinpoint A to B. And that is time in markets when you just get to understand the flow, the structure, the rhythm of trades, how structure leads up to your zones, what you'll see when your zones are met, how you can judge whether, oh, that's a good reaction, that's a shit reaction. If you all of this, right? That's I believe what sort of would make up most of a trader's honest edge, because anyone can follow a profitable system, but for many other external reasons just fail. But I'm leering away from my system to more psychological videos, which I am interested in making because I'm very passionate and able to talk about those. But yeah, this was my first video, which I'm going to publish for any viewers to just get an idea of my system and test it on. My watch list is Aussie, Euro, and just some cryptos and stocks. But it applies. I have tested it on everything. Mainly giving the best results on Aussie. Euro a close second, not much in a close third. The rest is more higher time frame swing plays, but with the same confluences of market structure, directional trend, support and resistance levels / bands, patience as far on waiting for the return to those levels, then 1 minute execution off of a meeting the level, a harsh reaction out of giving another confirmation of a directional reversal, and then waiting again for the reversal to that newly made 1 minute resistance or support band for then the entry. It's just everything is stringed together like you're just sewing a jumper, and that's what will then give outcomes like this. You can't just wake up, look at a chart and be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. You need immense contextual understanding of your system, what your criteria is, and then look at it immensely. Sometimes, because I know personally, I can mark up very quickly. Within a few minutes, I can have a general idea. But regardless of that, I set that aside, and every single session, I will always make sure I put a lengthy amount of time into looking at every single micro and macro factor that I need to make sure is seen before a trade, because it's a game of winners. You can't be a fucking loser. So that is first video. I'm just repeating myself a million times, right? Hopefully it was somewhat useful, and that you were able to absorb that knowledge and test it for yourselves and refine it even greater yourselves. That's really what I hope that me doing this can do. I have the ambition for the short future or the near future for me to be able to teach a few traders how to trade my system, but for them to then come back to me in a few months saying, mate, you're crap. Look at my statistics. Look at my probabilities. Look at my month-to-month gains and broker statements. I'll be like, that's what I wanted. I have a great desire to show people in the trading industry just the truth from the fake, and I hope to do that just by consistent transparency and just honest consistent work. I'm a massive believer in just strength endures. All the fake people within this industry are just going to fizzle out. That you can't maintain being a con man. Precision, skill, and the results will just do the talking for me, and I hope that my brain is clear enough to get the words across in a way that the viewers will be able to digest and learn for themselves. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I will be recording more. I'll probably in the future just record daily breakdown videos, just have a sort of little portfolio things online for people to see. And yeah, hopefully this was a useful video. Thank you.